Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Hubert Davis, a documentary filmmaker whose credits include Hardwood, which was nominated for both an Oscar and an Emmy, and Black Ice, which won the People's Choice Documentary Award at TIFF in 2022. This year, he's releasing two dramatic features. The Well, a thriller about a family struggling to survive in a dystopian near future, opens across Canada this Friday, and later this spring we'll see Youngblood, an update of the 80s hockey picture starring Ashton James in the role originally played by Rob Lowe. They're very different films, obviously, but they do have a similarity in their attention to specific detail and their focus on parent-child relationships. So I was a little surprised when Hubert picked Top Gun, Tony Scott's 1986 blockbuster starring Tom Cruise as Pete Maverick Mitchell, a cocksure fighter pilot whose rebellious nature is the only thing holding him back from being the best of the best. After one international incident too many, Maverick and his sidekick Goose are sent to an elite naval school for fighter pilots, where they're challenged by both their instructors and their classmates, and our hero finds himself drawn to an astrophysicist who's way too smart for him. A celebration of the rah-rah patriotism that defined the Reagan era, Top Gun also marks Cruise's transformation from interesting young actor to celebrity superstar. Although, in fairness, everybody in this movie is a star in the making. Kelly McGillis, Anthony Edwards, Val Kilmer, Meg Ryan, Tim Robbins. It's a big list. But only one of them is, and will become, Tom Cruise. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It was interesting. I think Top Gun was top of mind for some reason. And I think it was because I recently was remaking an 80s movie, Youngblood, a hockey movie. But it kind of forced me to go back to a lot of those movies that I grew up on in the 80s and looking at them again and reevaluating and kind of finding their own impact. So when the original Top Gun, I remember seeing it in the theater, I would have been like 11 years old. And I think it impacted me in ways that probably I didn't even think. I think movies do that when you see them and they're impactful. And it was, probably the biggest movie of the year. But this idea of Maverick and how he lived his life and, his relationships and all that stuff, I think it's somewhere, gets infused in you as a young man, growing up in the 80s. And so I was interested in kind of unpacking that a bit. And I think a good friend of mine gave me a book recently that had to do with Reagan in the 80s and movies. And so I've been reading that. And I guess it was just somewhere in there. And I thought of, what did we learn out of that time? What were movies trying to tell us? What did we take away from it? And so I think that's how I came to Top Gun.
Yeah, the Reagan aspect of it and the revolutions in movie making that had happened with the complete polar shift of what America was and how it perceived itself is so fascinating. I this is 2 years after Reagan's reelection, and there's just no longer any ambiguity about how America sees itself and what America is, to the point where, the year before we had Rambo First Blood Part 2, which was a complete 180 from the thrust of Ted Koch's First Blood, where it's about how America failed its Vietnam veterans and how like it's an ACAB movie where the police are all united in persecuting this poor guy who they think is just a filthy hippie. And then 3 years later, here's a sequel where Stallone gets to write his own ticket as the guy who finishes the Vietnam War. The line is actually literally, do we get to win this time? And by the time Top Gun comes along a year later, it's this incredibly slick production. It's sort of internalized all the commercial progress or the shift towards commercial cinema from Flashdance and Footloose. And now here we are putting all of that into an action movie where you're still telling the story of an underdog striver who has to prove that he's the best of the best. And of course, this is the film where Tom Cruise discovers that daddy issues work for him better than for any other actor on the planet. But you have this new animal which abstracts the menace into something that is simply called the enemy, because either they don't want to frighten Americans about the Russians, because again, this is 2 years after The Day After and all of those movies. It's this stew of genuine anxiety and an identity crisis that's happening in American cinema, and somehow it comes out the other end as this feel-good, uplifting war film.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's really it's a commercial. It is a commercial for the Navy, if you really break down. And they did, I was reading about it. They had some creative control over it. That was kind of like part of the thing. And I think it's really fascinating because, 80s movies are producer driven. This is Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. This is like the mega producer day and age, coming out of the 70s, which was auteur filmmakers, and it was much more, directors in control and,
Mhm.
getting to, express themselves and get to question things and paranoia and all these things. And what we move into, what's so interesting about this era and growing up in this era is the unquestioning of things, like we're not going to actually question anything. And and also I think for me as a filmmaker was also interesting is to watch commercial directors who then move over into features. And obviously, the biggest example is Ridley Scott. But this is Tony Scott, his brother, who I think doesn't get as much love, cinematic love, as I would say Ridley does. But he is, if you watch his films, there is something happening. There is a very strong stylistic point of view and the things that he's trying to make. And I think you see that in a lot of commercial directors. You actually see a real style that they're trying to bring to it. And I think that was, interesting because it's very like even watching it now, the visuals are quite strong in his choices, how he's able to capture that. And I think that was, something that really, yeah, came out of this time. And again, it has an effect on you, whether you like it or not. It was, the biggest movie of that year. So there is something about it that is connecting to people on a mass scale. And I do think part of that is this idea of, Reagan in the 80s and this idea of we're good, like America's great. We need to stand up for ourselves. We are the best, like we are the best. That's what it is. And we need everything else. We don't need to question anything else. We don't need to worry about Vietnam. We don't need to worry about Watergate, all that stuff. Jimmy Carter, we need to move on. And there's a level of fantasy and escapism that I think that goes to that I think that strangely, I think that sentiment and that idea is of nationalism and this kind of forgetting about everything else. You still see the appeal of that today.
Yeah, I mean, just as like the MAGA movement wants the same thing that I think the 80s wanted, which was to take America back to a 50s where, God help us, white men were respected and everyone else knew their place. And it's just so vile.
But it's a fiction. It is a fiction. That's the other thing you have to understand. It is not a real place. It's this idea of if I block out all this other noise, then I can create this place. But it actually doesn't exist. And I think that's what's so interesting about it is this call to something that you think you remembered or you thought it was in the past, having no context for what that actual time was and what people were going through. Which is, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, movies have always been escapism. I think that's, the part of it is you go to this theater and you are able to escape. But it's interesting based on the political, what's happening in the culture, movies can allow you to question things, see things in a new way, or they can just double down on the idea of the status quo and what it is. And that's basically what Top Gun is. And I think that's why some people, like I had read about, turned it down or, didn't want to be a part of it. And I think that's interesting. So even then, there's people who are like, no, this is too much. This is glorifying war, but yet it still works. And why does it work? And I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, the year before Back to the Future comes along and is exactly the counter argument, right? Like it is telling you that the past wasn't what your parents are insisting it was. The world was crueler and meaner and it always has been. And a year later, it's like, you know what? Well, let's play volleyball on the beach. Let's just not think about any of that stuff. And it is like David Cronenberg loves telling people that Bruckheimer and Simpson wanted him to make this, and he'd been approached for Flashdance, and because he'd made The Dead Zone at Paramount, and they just threw everything they had in development at him, and he just like, I don't know where to like, how do you even make this movie? And then you see what they did, and it's like, oh yeah, no, it's completely counter to how Cronenberg works. There are no long takes. There's no thought. There's no interrogation of the theme. It's just it's such a thin story. And I'm weirdly enough, I'm not saying that in a derogative way. There is like it's a freight train for this simple two-dimensional narrative about a kid who becomes the best at the thing he does. And it's entertaining.
It is. And I think this is, in watching it again, I think the reason it works is actually the characters. And I think who I don't, and again, I have no dissection of who came in where and what writer came in where to flesh out the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason it works and it worked was I think it's, obviously Tom Cruise and his charisma being able to pull off the super driven at all costs, there's something in that was very like, it's like, okay, this is him. But I think Goose, I think that, the Anthony Edwards character and casting him, I think he's crucial when you watch it again. I think Val Kilmer is actually so crucial because Val Kilmer, like, it's so interesting, like watching his doc about him that they really anticipated he was going to be a leading man. He's very good looking, he's talented, he's a leading man. But over the doc, what you realize is no, he's actually a character actor. He's a character actor stuck in this beautiful, face. And so I think Val Kilmer actually like there, and then Meg Ryan when she comes in
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
there's just like a couple of these key actors in those particular roles that makes it very watchable. It makes it rewatchable. You understand those characters. Those characters read as true, and so therefore that's what elevates it above probably what it was as a script. And you're like, as a script, I could see you being like, oh, what is this? And the one other character I have to say, Tom Skerritt.
Yeah.
I think he's very good. He's such a good actor that you care. Like he makes that relationship when he said, "Hey, I flew with your dad and I understood him and this is the thing." It's like that's what grounds it. And I think that's the difference between it and maybe other really bad action 80s movies that they didn't have the character depth in order to make the story work for the viewer is kind of what I think.
I think that's a pretty good assessment. The casting in this is it really is doing all the lifting, I think. And the fact that every single person in this cast became like a legitimate star, except for Kelly McGillis, who I think, and through no fault of her own, just became someone no one knew what to do with. She's in
Yeah.
Witness and she's in Top Gun, and then all of a sudden, well, she wants to do substantial work, and that's not how Hollywood sees her. And so, plus, of course, like she was gay and closeted at the time, and that just brought up so much other stuff that we don't see because again this movie is not about anything that isn't like straight white and upstanding. Are there any people of color in the film? I can't.
There, Sundown. So
That's right.
Sundown.
Clarence Gilliard. Yeah.
Yes. And what I realized later is I was like, oh, what? Yeah, what happened? What he was great, and he's in Die Hard. He's the hacker. He's
Right,
Hans
right, right.
Gruber's
Theo.
hacker in Die Hard, who I also loved him in that role, and I thought was great casting, and he's amazing in it. And then I think because I was looking him up, he's passed away not that long ago, I think,
Oh.
but I was like, what happened to him? And then I think he was in
Television. Did a lot of television. He's in Walker, Texas Ranger. He's in Matlock.
that's right. So
He's
I
a
think
regular on Matlock.
yeah, so he just went to TV. But yeah, it's interesting like those two characters, and Kelly McGillis I thought of as well because I also, remember seeing Witness in the theater growing up in Vancouver. And yeah, it's like with her, I wonder, yeah, is she too is she too smart? Is she too sophisticated? And again, I think that's what works about the way she's playing that character is she does sometimes you wonder, she's like, what? You can even see like what she's thinking, what the hell is going on here? Like, who are these guys? Who are these yahoos? But like that works for that relationship and that dynamic that she's there, she's smart, she's there to teach them, but she, also has to deal with these yahoos. And it doesn't it doesn't take them too seriously. I think that's the thing is you kind of know Mav and Goose are jokers. And it's kind of poking fun at that. Like these aren't they're kind of idiots, you know? And it allows you to be in on that joke to know, you know? And I think that's important too, you know? It's like um but yeah, it was a very interesting watching it again just to see how it was crafted and constructed. And you're right, like how it moves, the edit, how it moves along, it never stays anywhere too long to kind of like, you know, just keep driving it forward and always, you know, have a smoke machine and try and make things look beautiful, you know?
Yeah. I was controversial. The thing I remember the most about the controversies around the film in '86 was there was at least one, it was probably Entertainment Tonight, there was at least one news magazine show that was absolutely horrified by the fact that you could see tongues in the love scene between Cruise and McGillis. And it's like, that's not the worst thing about that scene.
No, that scene does not hold up very well. I
No.
gotta say, that was the one scene that you're like, I wouldn't mind fast forwarding through this. Like it is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is not a great, yeah, love scene is, you know, that's a very forgettable, yeah, visually uncomfortable kind of moment as I
Yeah.
rewatch. And I was like, oh, I'd rather not see that again.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's because Cruise, like, this is my theory of Top Gun, is this is the movie where Tom Cruise learns to be Tom Cruise.
yeah,
And that is the narrative of the film. And it's also the text of the story. And it's fascinating because nobody knows in the film or making it what Tom Cruise is going to become.
yeah,
Like his other movie this year is Legend, where
right,
he
yeah.
plays a forest boy.
Right,
And
right.
it's like it is an incredibly uncharismatic performance. And here it's just like Ridley Scott saw that, and Tony sees, I think, you know, like he's a G.I. Joe doll. Let's see what
Right,
happens
right.
if you just make him insist in the film that he is the most interesting and most charismatic and most capable and competent person. Because Maverick is right. He's always right, except when he's not in an airplane, which is the entirety of the rest of his life. Which and yeah, like as you say, they're idiots. They're like he and Goose are annoying frat boys. The bar
Yes.
scene, which is fun, I don't think it's fully on their side. I think it's the scene where we are sort of allowed to step back and go, "Oh God, they would be so obnoxious."
Yeah, you relate when I watch it, you relate more to
Mm,
Kelly McGill's because she's like, what is happening here? And she's like, she, you know, goes in the bath, he follows her into the bathroom, which
yeah,
is like creepy. And then she's kind of like, you know, like, what are you trying to achieve here? You know, like she's really questioning this guy's tactics and approach. And yet it's like, okay, no, there's something that's interesting about him, this idea of this very driven um, person. And I think also why it works um, is because he is driven and he's driven by this past and this idea of like his relationship with his dad. And like you said, he's becomes the master of, you know, actors with daddy issues. But he's got this issue with his dad. And, you know, Goose is like, hey, you know, when I'm up there with you, it feels like I'm flying with a ghost. Like you've always got this chip on your shoulder. You're always trying to do something outside of yourself. And so I think the actual messaging, it's funny, like you're talking about First Blood and like how the actual messaging of that movie is, I think, good, which is the idea that he's an individual, he hasn't dealt with his past traumas. In order to deal with your past traumas, you have to come to peace with that, and then he is able to be part of this team and this collective and this idea that not being just an individual out on your own is not good. You have to fit within what people are trying to do in order to help each other. And that I think is actually you know, like the takeaway of what that's trying to say, I think is right in a society that is interestingly mostly about individualism at this point. And you've got like movies like Wall Street and stuff like, you know, that it's Secret of My Success and even
right.
like Cocktail and all these movies. The real message is like you got to get rich, right? Like this is a society where we're trying to get rich. I mean, Wall Street's trying to do something against it and talk against it, but it's talking about the issues of that time. So I think there is something in the messaging of that of when you never leave your wingman, that um, is actually is good, like is a good takeaway for people and people to have, like this idea of accountability. And so that, again, I think it's like little things like that that seem small but actually are at the foundation of what the movie says. So then if that foundation of what the thing the movie says makes sense, then you feel okay at the end walking away, even though World War III probably might have started after.
Yeah, well, that's a problem for another movie, and the blitheness of that is kind of incredible. But you're right. Yeah, Iceman is correct in every assessment. That's the other thing about Kilmer that's so fascinating, is like he is he's not the hero of the movie, but he is the good guy. He's right. He's prettier than than Maverick. Like his teeth aren't all screwed up, and he has more charisma. He's more interesting to watch, and his military tactics and theories are on point. He understands what's at stake, and this idiot is coming in and just because he flies a little better, he's getting all the attention. And there's something really lovely about Maverick the movie, the sequel, that
Mhm.
acknowledges that they ended up like respecting each other, and that in fact, like, Kaczynski has been protecting Maverick throughout this entire career of being someone who has not learned the lesson that he's been trying to teach him for 40 years. The sense that, you get left behind because you're not actually listening to anyone.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's all there in the original, which I do find fascinating, because there's almost no dialogue about it. There's almost no,
Yeah.
like, it's just dynamism. It's the way their relationship plays out, and the shot choices and everything else. And I don't know that the movie knows this, but
That's
the actors do.
interesting. That's interesting. Like, what I think that's really interesting. Like, what is actually intentional,
Mm-hmm.
and then what is the happenstance of all these things that come together? And I think that's the one thing that is fascinating about any movie is, and again, like there is this kind of illusion of the director as the be all end all, and they did everything, came up with everything. And I always liked it. I heard this analogy, the sports analogy, this idea that in football, the quarterback gets more credit if
Mm-hmm.
the things are successful, and they get more blame than they deserve if it's a failure, which I think is true. I think as a director, you that is a contract that you are signing up for, that if this goes great, I'm going to get more credit. And there's no way as a director that you are able to own all those things that happen, because actors are coming in, because there's casting choice, editing, music, all those things, unless it's a animation. And I think that's also the mythology that is put into the world. It's like Alfred Hitchcock. I was listening to his podcast. That's part of his mythology, right? Is I know everything, I framed everything, every detail in there was exactly what I wanted. But it can't possibly be true. You couldn't possibly own it. It's some days it's going to rain, some days it's not. Like
Yeah, yeah.
someone shows up and they're just doing it differently than was in your head. So I think that's really fascinating. Is what comes through in the movie that works. Which part of it was intentional and which parts aren't. And I think it's interesting, like even the references, like I don't know if it's true, but I've read about Tony Scott and his reference to the photographer Bruce Weber, and that a lot of that stuff, when they're all in the towel scenes, there's a
Right.
lot of, and it's like this idea of the subversion of, homosexuality, right? Like of Bruce Weber's work. And he's just like, it's so beautiful. So he puts it in. There's this crazy Tarantino
Oh, yeah, yeah. The sleep with me theory.
sleep with me theory. But it's like, so there's all this stuff that is infused within your film that I think you're making, that is coming from all these sorts of different references that come together and put together. And some of it is intentional and some of it is not. And then the audience becomes the ones who take that away and receive it.
Yeah, I do wonder too, the homoeroticism, the volleyball scene, the shower scenes. It's undeniable that these actors are being presented as beautiful specimens, and in a way that Kelly McGillis's character never is.
Yeah.
And Meg Ryan is like she's desexualized to the point, like she's a mom, she's a widow, like she has no she has no opportunity to be alive in the
Yeah.
same way. But there's also like, this is the age of AIDS. This is a point
Mhm.
in time where queerness, gayness, it's not spoken, it's not acknowledged, certainly not in Hollywood. Reagan hadn't even, I don't think, said AIDS or HIV yet. He wouldn't declare it until the last year of his term. And it would have been like, I'm sure you could trick a nervous producer because there's nothing that Jerry Bruckheimer or Don Simpson ever did that could be seen as gay friendly. Um, but you could trick them by saying, look, this is how we get the women in. You want to see how beautiful these men are, and show them being like these Greek gods or these incredible Olympians. And then just, like, you know what, they could be shinier. Let's make them sweatier, and play into it to the point where in Maverick there's a beach volleyball scene, and there are now women there, and it feels like that's good. Like, it's progressive. There are women pilots, there are female officers at the Top Gun Academy, all of this stuff. And yet at the same time, it's just like, this doesn't feel like the way it's the one moment in the entire sequel, this legacy sequel, where it just kind of hits this weird speed bump of, yeah, we had to do this. And I don't know
Right.
if the, yeah, we had to do this is include women or have a beach volleyball scene, because the whole point of it is that Tom Cruise just can't hack it because he's
I think
60 and getting thick around the middle.
I think you need both. Yeah, it was probably both. We have to have this scene in it, but we also now have female pilots, so they also have to be in it. And it's like, how do we justify these two? How do we balance these two things?
Yeah.
Um,
It kind of breaks the spell that Tony Scott cast in the first film, where women really are accessories to this story.
yes.
And I am not defending that in any way. I think it's incredibly retrograde, but it is the way machinery worked in the 80s in cinema, and storytelling, specifically American cinema. But I don't know that you can get the same energy if you don't isolate these men with each other.
Mm, yeah.
Top Gun, the first film, is all about testosterone
Yeah.
and why it doesn't necessarily make you a better person.
Yes, for sure. It's like, it's so telling of this group of guys are together. And there is a lot of uh homoerotic references when you
Mm-hmm.
watch it again. Like this idea of, like just there's a lot of the dialogue is very like, oh, this is interesting. Like, when you actually watch it again, you're like, oh wow. And so it's very I think in sports in general, the idea of like groups of men who are together and they're changing their athletics are coming together. There's always been this like it's like strange mixture of those two things, and I think you're seeing that obviously with the hockey show that has come out now, and it's like it taps into it just directly. It's like, oh, okay, like this, we're just going to tap into this. And I think you're probably right as a selling point for Top Gun in the 80s for the producers, 100%. I think you're exactly right. This is how we get women in to see the movie, right? Like, we've already kind of got guys because we got the all these action sequences, but how do we get women to watch it? And this is how we do it. We show these beautiful men and show it. So it's like, it's a really, again, like interesting aesthetic that the 80s has. And I think like Flashdance is another amazing example of that, where it's just so stylized and beautiful. And even like I watched Fame again, and how that shot and how beautiful it is. It's because it's not just slick. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of things that you see that are very slick and feel very polished, but it's actually has life in it. And I think that's what that aesthetic is really interesting. And the other film that I think of is Fatal Attraction. Also, again, like commercial director comes in from the UK. He's bringing this aesthetic into it. I think he also directed Flashdance. I think
Yeah,
it's a,
Adrian Lyne, he did.
yeah. And it's like it's really interesting because there is the argument as a cinema person would be, oh, it's style over substance, right? They brought in a style, but there's no substance to it. But yet within the work that they're doing, the performances they get out of actors, there is something that is works in something like Fatal Attraction, and what he was able to get out of it. So it's like that's what I think I'm always like trying to reconcile is this idea of, is cinema just this one thing, right? 70s films, this is the height of cinema. This is all garbage, you know? And I'm like, I don't know, like it's interesting in those in between moments of what people are able to get uh out of movies and infuse themselves in very probably I would imagine difficult circumstances dealing with Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. I can't imagine that was like an easy, day at the office. So anyway, I'm just interested in that. I think those make really interesting rewatches, for me.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about the new 4K editions of Thunderheart and Hearts of Darkness of Filmmakers Apocalypse, and there's a lot more on the way, including the new releases of Wicked for Good, Roofman, and One Battle After Another. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io, or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. Because of the rise of cable television and home video, these are the films that never went away.
Right.
In a way that films from the 40s, 50s, 60s, even the 70s ebbed and flowed through distribution. Top Gun has probably been on a television screen somewhere in the world ever since the VHS tape came out, at any given moment. And the way that sort of pervasively seeps into a culture and shapes it, you're soaking in it, right? Like American movies Tom Cruise has been dominant for, I guess it's 40 years now. Like Top Gun is 40 years old this year, which just melts my head completely off.
Yeah.
And the beehive smoke and the like the quick cuts and these are all British directors too. Adrian Lyne,
that's right.
Alan Parker, who made Fame,
Alan Parker,
and Tony Scott, and Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
They're all coming from a different school, and I don't think they could help but be subversive of an American culture, which the British didn't really respect Reagan at all. They had Thatcher a couple of years earlier to show them what this stuff leads to, and there is a jaundiced eye at work here. And then, weirdly enough, I always wondered if Verhoeven cast Michael Ironside in Starship Troopers because he's in Top Gun.
Yeah. He's also, sorry, I forgot to mention, he's great as well. He's perfectly cast, stoic.
Yep.
Like, hey, I just don't know. Would you fly with him? That's a question. It's like, hey, I just don't know. He's Tim Robbins also is in it. He has, he's Merlin. He's got this. So I think that those directors are coming over and what they have is craft. They've been working on their craft and they understand who they are as filmmakers and what they bring. And you see to all their work, familiarity and a way that they're shooting things that is very specific. And I think that's probably what I picked up on as, watching these films is, why does this feel different? Like, why does this feel different than sometimes, you'll go back and see another pretty, mainstream movie that people liked, and it doesn't really have any sort of style to it. It is very paint by numbers and a lot of other things when you rewatch them. There's not a lot of, it feels that, at least to me, didn't feel like a lot of creative decisions were being made aesthetically. It was kind of like, oh, here's the wide shot, here's a medium, here's a close up, we get through, and you're just paint by numbers, get through the movie. And I think that's why I connected to those directors and a lot of those films over growing up, and somewhere it was in my brain that was interesting. Like, there was an aesthetic there was choices, and that meant something, like there's a scene in Fatal Attraction where they're in a park and they're just running. The two of them are like running, and it's all handheld and it's very frenetic. And it's not like most of the other movie. It's a very specific choice for that particular scene of things are kind of getting out of control in their relationship. And it's like little moments like that, they seem like kind of arbitrary, but they're actually quite like, to me, like as a filmmaker, they're quite profound because you're like, oh wow, like that's a choice. Like he made a choice there that made perfect sense to him, that then translated me as the audience to understand what was going on in that moment. Um, and I think, yeah, there are certain the sequence, like watching it again, the sequence where Tom Cruise jumps on his motorbike, races off, she jumps in her car and speeds after him, races through the thing, and then rolls up, and they have the whole argument. It's a very like well done scene. Like when you
Yeah.
see it, like you're like that to pull that off. And again, it's like it's just craft. It's a ability to make this moment visceral and cinematic. And I think there's something to that.
Yeah. And then, of course, you step back. It's like, well, they've disrupted traffic. And they're like, this is all,
Yeah,
how is no one chasing them? And of course, it's like, it's 1985 and nobody cares. But it is like, it is the sense that you're watching two very special people. Like the whole movie is about this. It's about a removal of characters into a place where they're surrounded by it's a high school picture that really like
yeah,
the
yeah,
machinery of it is the Breakfast Club in a weird way.
yeah.
They're all trapped with each other. They have to learn to get along and function as a team. And also there are MiGs and a war going on. It's like this whole. We just rewatched The Hunt for Red October
Oh yeah,
on New Year's Day because it's Kate's. She won't admit it, but it's her favorite movie,
right,
and she'll probably admit it at this point. And you think this is 4 years later, and it is the same studio. It's Paramount. It's Mace Neufeld and Tom Clancy rather than Bruckheimer and Simpson and Scott, but and John McTiernan coming off Die Hard with the "I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. You can't stop me." But its sense of professionalism and order and a bunch of people who are like it's competence pornography. Everybody is the best at their jobs and they're trying to save the world or stop it from spiraling into disaster. And I thought just like there is no one from Top Gun who could like no character from Top Gun would factor into this. And I think
no,
it's
that's right.
deliberate. The one time you see a fighter plane, it's crashing
Right,
on video, right? Like it's
right,
happening
right.
on the aircraft carrier. And that's the scene where Fred Dalton Thompson gets to be all serious and say, this is going to get out of control and we'll be lucky to survive it. And that felt to me like a response, like a direct response
Yeah, that's
to
interesting.
Top Gun by the
Right,
film, but not the characters.
right,
And yet you think about it and it's like, actually, yeah, Ironside and Scarrett, they would all fit on this movie. They're the professionals and they're like
right,
they're the teachers, they're the guidance counselors
right.
trying to wrangle these kids into something provocative
Yeah,
and or
but
not
no,
provocative and trying to wrangle these kids into a position where they can actually serve.
yeah, no, that is interesting. Yeah, there is something that is. I mean, even that opening scene, like where Tom Cruise character, inverts his jet, and then like that's the one scene you're like, meh. Like you're like, watching it, and it's like, oh, that was just too much, right? It just went too far into the realm of fantasy,
Mm.
even within the rules that it has presented itself. Um, the other thing that I would say that it's watching it and really struck me as odd is how they're basically graduating and then they just get called immediately
Yeah.
over. It's like there's an incident, so they have to fly them out. It's like, was there no one else in between that could have handled or been closer to that? Like it seems very early, but it's like, oh, now they're back in the mix. They just finished. Okay, let's send them in there.
Yeah. At least in Maverick, there is the sequel. There is the situation existing, pre-existing, and it's like this is why we're rushing you in. This
Right,
is
right,
happening, so we need to get on top of it.
right.
Here it's just like, hey, you saw the enemy before. Let's go see him again.
He's not doing great at that point. Like Maverick is definitely not the best person to put in there out of that whole class. It's like he's not the one that they should send in. Like it definitely was a bad idea. It's like who made that call? I mean, again, this is the military though, so there's a lot of as we realize and learn more and more, there's a lot of bad decisions that get made. Similar to that. But yeah, it's funny. The other thing I was thinking about also was this context of we put movies into time periods and we go and we defend them for a lot of their choices based off of that time period,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know? But I think what's interesting too, when I was looking back at other 80s movies, and I thought the best example of this is John Hughes. And I thought, so John Hughes movies come out, and then because we all grew up on those movies, And if you're at a certain age, you saw all those movies. You saw, Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and everything else that he wrote. Um, and in a lot of those movies is, just blatant homophobia, racism,
Yep.
like really offensive language. And then the defense that I hear most people goes, oh, well, that was the time. Like that was the 80s. But then when I went through and started rewatching movies from the 80s, like those words aren't in most mainstream movies. Like they're not in like Lethal Weapon, like they're not even in Die Hard, Die Hard, these things and the casting and all that. So then my realization is no, 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 that's one person. John Hughes is writing all of that material and
Mhm.
he's putting it into the material and we're consuming it at the time. So we're like, this time was extremely homophobic and racist and whatever, and this is what it is. And it kind of gives you permission that it's like, no, 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 that was the time we lived in. But then in the bigger context, I think it's like, no, it's just again, it's like a choices of individual creators within those things who have influence and are able to push things like we talked about, like what can you push through? What ideas in your head can you actually push into your films and into mainstream? And I think, I love John Hughes movies, but that clearly was something that was in his head that he was trying to subvert and put into his films.
I wonder, maybe the success of those films indicates that the time was more receptive to it, or it was a speed bump that people just kind of like, yeah, that happens too. But mostly, I want to watch Ferris Bueller sing in the parade. But it is a weird balancing act of these are the things. Yes, you can say it was a different time, but you're right. You've also got John Sayles working at the same time,
Right,
and you've
right,
got Jarmusch is coming up. There are all these indie filmmakers who are just simply not doing that,
right.
but they're not massive commercial successes either. So how do you navigate it?
Yeah, and is it it's a bit of the chicken and the egg. I mean, I think the reason that I landed on no, it's him is because it's consistent in what
Mm-hmm.
he's doing and what he's putting out there. And so it clearly there was something in his head that was, but you're right, the acceptance of those things in a mainstream space that we all say, hey, that's fine, I think is also telling of the times that we're like, yeah, okay, this is, passable. This is it's the 80s.
Yeah.
Like I guess there's something about that decade that we allowed a lot of things to happen, without questioning them. And I think that's kind of goes back to this idea of what the 80s is and this time of unquestioning things, putting things in kind of a fantasy space and then going with it. And I think there is parallels to, issues that we're dealing with today that are very much in that same thing. It's like, what do we let pass? What do we put into a bubble? What do we, all these like action reaction to something that I think obviously we haven't figured out all these years later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any TV network right now is trying to figure out what can pass in the States without being rejected by half of the audience, whichever half that is.
Right.
And you've got like Taylor Sheridan's weird explorations of American masculinity that always somehow end up saying, well, the old white guy's usually right. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. But you've made a film, like you have remade an 80s movie. So I'm really curious to know about that needle. How do you thread what did you decide was worth preserving and what needed to be left behind for a film like Youngblood?
Yeah, so I would say that it's so funny. Like I took away when I read the script, I thought it was interesting that they turned the original on its head because the original film is basically like Rob Lowe's character, he comes in, he is a skill player, but he doesn't know how to fight. He gets beaten up, and the lesson is he's got to go back. There's a training, training montage with his dad and his brother. He learns how to fight. He comes back and he's able to fight. And that's the most important thing is that this takeaway. And in the script, like credit to, to the writers and the producers, but it was like, okay, what if we did the opposite of that? What if he is taught how to fight, as a kid and his dad is like, look, you got to have a chip on your shoulder and be aggressive and fight. But he's really a skill player, so that it's more. This is where I thought of the original Top Gun. It's more the idea of you can't let these past issues, demons, things in your past affect who you need to be to find your own path. And I thought that was a good lesson. I still took that away from Top Gun. So I was like, okay, this is how this could work. We could work it in that structure that he is Maverick. He's, off doing his things, and then he comes back and this idea of team and what do you do for the team and how do you everyone has to play their role and you have to figure out what your path is in that thing in order for the collective to be successful. So that's what I did. I kind of borrowed from the 80s stuff that I liked and then reversed the 80s stuff that I didn't like, and it's like, and it's okay to question those things now. But I still wanted some synth in there, and I wanted, I wanted those big moments of the big game. I wanted you to still feel that nostalgia of what that feeling is. Like, it's gonna happen, but you're still satisfied that it does happen. Like I think that's the balance is, how do you keep the audience? It's a sports film. So how do you keep them engaged and know that you're going to hear some synth and some cool stuff is going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the thing that fascinates me about all formula storytelling. Like, we know more or less what's going to happen. What we don't know is how.
Yeah.
And what it means to the characters. And that's the most important thing for me is, like, I want to see someone earn their victory.
Yeah.
And while I don't know that it happens in Top Gun, because, we're told right away he's the best. And look, there he is being the best. I guess that worked out for him. At
That's
least
a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, at least Maverick, I was so sure that it was going to be, like, it's set up to be a sacrifice picture, right? Like, this is a legacy film where somebody who can no longer perform at this capacity passes the torch. We get all of this heavy stuff, and then in the end, because it's Tom Cruise, you can't. Like,
Yeah, that's
the same
right.
way, the same way the Mission Impossible movies were supposed to end this
Yeah.
year or last
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, no,
You
we're going to
can't.
show
Yeah.
you why we can never like, Tom Cruise doesn't. I truly believe Tom Cruise doesn't think he can die.
No, clearly from the stunts that he's performing, and you're seeing, clearly he does not think he can die, and
Yeah.
and it's very. And what's again, like, I think the funny thing with Tom Cruise is we're active participants in it, because like one of those videos drops and that's all everyone's talking about. He does his own stunts. Oh, he breaks his ankle and this. Oh, he's going off this cliff and this. He's always holding onto the side of a plane. Like, the idea of spectacle and this idea of needing to see Tom Cruise in more and more danger, like, are we part of the problem? Because we're subscribing to this, and he's like pushing it further and further. He's Evil Knievel. He's jumping over. Okay, it's going to be 10 buses next time, and there's going to be a big thing of fire, and let's see what happens. And we're like, yeah, like, let's see what happens. I think there's something so basic about it and base in us as human beings that I don't think we always want to admit to either, that we're like, there's something that you get satisfaction out of it. It's like,
Absolutely. I mean, I think, if you want to make the Eros and Thanatos argument, sex and death are intertwined, and the stunts are his version of sex scenes now, because he just doesn't do that anymore.
Right.
Like, he won't give himself a romantic relationship in the Mission Impossible movies. He has a wife that we meet after they're married, once everything is settled, and then we see her again, but only very briefly and not in any kind of romantic context. The stuff with Rebecca Ferguson, like, I have this whole hour-long theory of the Mission Impossible movies as reflections of his Scientology, and how 7 of the 8 movies involve suppressive persons, like people within the organization that are trying to bring him down. And it's
so interesting.
It's absolutely fascinating. This is
not
that my theory is fascinating, but reading the Mission movies as the expressions of his own personal narrative. And then the Top Gun sequel comes along, and it's like, it's him grudgingly agreeing to do the things that material needs, which is weird and mature and interesting in a way that the Mission movies aren't, because they always conform to what he wants to be, which is Ethan Hunt is never wrong. Ethan Hunt is always the only person. Like, the last movie is 3 hours of him convincing people to trust him who already trust him. It's fascinating. But with Maverick, he's willing to, like, subsume his ego to the character for the first 3 acts, and then they tack on the 4th act where, he doesn't die, he's going to save the day anyway.
Right.
But that felt like his concession. Like, this is what I'll do to this is what I will allow until I can show you that I'm still the most important person in the world. So watching the original film, where his whole future is ahead of him and he's this unformed thing that
Yeah.
will become the most powerful superstar of his era and maybe ever,
Mm.
to the point now where, yes, he can go to space if he wants to and take a
Yeah.
stunt team with him to shoot
Right.
something.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating to see this embryonic version of the Tom Cruise effect, where the movie still agrees, oh no, he's very important. And then he finished the film and he went on the press tour and it's like never stopped.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think the one thing that I realized about Tom Cruise is and this is what I think about the movie business in general,
Mm.
of like when we get it right, like when things go right, it's generally the story has something to do with ambition, right? This idea at all costs, I'm going to do this thing, because that is ultimately what movie making is. It's just a bunch of people who have, the ambition to do the thing is the greatest thing, and it actually doesn't make any sense, like to go through and try and make a movie is incredibly hard. To put together the money to put all these things together, the success rate is very low in the grand scheme of things that get made, but the ambition and the drive to do the thing is paramount. It is the most important thing. And why do people do that? And I think that's what Tom Cruise, taps into is, this desire, his Maverick's desire and his desire to be great and be the best. And he's so driven, and you don't know why, but somewhere in there, and this is the backstory to his dad, for his character, but you do believe it. You do realize they are one and the same, that this is, fundamentally who he is. There's a desire that he has to be the best. And I think that's a lot of, movie stars that you see. There's clearly something that is in them that is a desire to want to be like, to be loved, right? To be universally
Sure.
loved. That is a very particular, thing that I think most of us do not have, where we're like, I'd love a stranger to come up to me on the street and say how great I am, like, um, so I just think yeah, it was like the persona of who he was, and that we somehow in that movie, I think we recognized it, that he did have that thing, and he did have that thing. And then you're right, he never stopped after that. It was each thing was him, yeah, trying to be the very best version of whatever that was, the race car driver, or, the last samurai, like, didn't matter
Mhm.
where he was, what what era he was in. He was always, that guy. And I think there is something that is honest in it. And I think that sometimes, and authentic. And I think I was thinking about this other day of like, why do some films fail and some succeed? And I do think it's that level of authenticity. It doesn't mean, like, I've seen movies that have a very low budget. Like I saw a movie a couple months ago that was like, made for $500,000, but it worked better than a movie that I saw that was $2 million.
Yeah.
And it was just the level of authenticity that I could tell, oh, when they were making it, they made it with intent of, and they were somehow connected to the material in a real way. And the one that's made for a couple $1 million, maybe it wasn't. It was like trying to, and there's something that we could just tell as human beings. We're like, oh no, that's not, yeah, that's not, it's intangible, but it's not real in some capacity. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Yeah. A film as glossy as Top Gun can still read as urgent and immediate and involving because we believe it. We believe what we're seeing. And we're still allowed to question all of it, as we still are
Yes.
40 years later. Like, this is absolutely, you know, a polite fiction about the way the military works and individualism being valued and all of that stuff. But it's fun while it's happening and it moves really well and it's lit really, it's appealing. It seduces us. And we want to be seduced, right? Like we want to buy in.
Yeah. I think that's like why like a lot of Christopher Nolan's work is because he's able to seduce an audience. He's able to present things and shoot things and craft things in such a way that engages a mass group of people. And so even like in some of his work that you're like these plot holes and you're like, what are you doing? It's like, this doesn't make any sense. the way that it drives and it's moving and is crafted, it's like it supersedes it at points, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Oh no, he's a master of momentum. He will pull you along by the lower lip through his entire narrative.
And it's amazing that it works. Like you're still there. You're like, oh, this must be important. Like everything cinematically is telling me that this is important and makes sense, even though you're someone in your brain's like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't matter, you know? And I think there's there's something fascinating about that is like, what are those things that where craft wins out over logic? It doesn't always have to make sense. Like it isn't always about clarity, actually. It's about the emotional attachment to the feeling of and why you get that when you're watching it.
Yeah. The force of will
Yeah.
on the other side of the screen. You also have a movie coming out this week, which is not an 80s film at all. Like
No.
I do love that we're talking about this massive cultural footprint, machine tooled movie. And the reason you're here is because you've also got The Well coming out this week, which is a
Yeah.
very small, very intimate, kind of an isolation drama. And I love the it's not a contrast exactly. It's more of a contradiction that they're both movies about people in isolation. That was my hook. It's like, oh, that makes sense. And then it's like, no, it doesn't. And it has nothing to do with each other. But it is like, it's such an interesting challenge as a narrative to tell a story about a handful of people dealing with one small problem that just keeps escalating. And then right after that, you jump into Youngblood for a number of reasons. And it's a completely different film again.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it was so strange to make them back to back, because it's really what it was. Like I finished The Well while we're in post-production. Youngblood comes in, I read the script, we talk about that film and what that could be and what that movie needs to be. And so it was really coming back to back. So I finished one and then jumped to the other. And the interesting thing is The Well is the first narrative feature that I've made. And I think, for that reason, my part of my reasoning brain is like, keep it small, keep not a lot of characters. And you also put yourself into your own box. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy in that you're like, okay, don't think bigger, just think smaller. You kind of get, and I think what I learned after I finished The Well, when I got to Youngblood, is don't do that. Don't worry about that. Just make it for what it needs to be within what that genre is. And I think with The Well, what I really learned is a lot about working with actors and that idea of casting and performance. And I think and how enjoyable it was. That's something obviously you don't get to do in documentary. And I love that process so much. And we had such a good time doing that I was kind of able to just carry that along into Youngblood. But yeah, there couldn't be more different films. I think The Well is very small, intimate. It's about the characters. It's in this, very, remote, isolated place. And and I think that was, it was interesting in that way to do, especially a smaller film as my first narrative. But yeah, so it was, and I think I was trying to explore things in that was much more personal to me, maybe. I mean, I think each thing you bring something that's personal to you, like Youngblood was the relationship between a father and a son. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, so there was that connection to it that I had and was trying to rectify. So there always should be, I think, something personal that is attached to it for you. But The Well is much more about, I think, being a parent and the fear for your kids and what the future is. And so I just brought a lot of anxiety to it, my own anxiety, and got to explore it and shoot it and then hopefully be done with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's arriving right now on the heels of the 28 Years Later movies, which are also about sort of collapsed societies forming new directions and values. And I found it really fascinating now to see. I just saw The Bone Temple a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, oh, it's also about a young person caught between two different ways of being.
Right.
Which is exactly what The Well is about. It's about this young woman who is unprepared for an entirely different way of existing, which we can immediately clock is wrong, but she can't.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like the idea is you go out into the world as a kid and you need other people. So this idea of community and I believe in that, and we need to hear other people and hear different sides of things and what do you believe and what do you believe from your experience? You need that, but it doesn't mean that that isn't dangerous, right? Like the danger is you're going to go out in the world and are your kids going to like go this way and this way? Like, or are they going to be able to find themselves within it and figure out, oh, okay, I'll take a bit from this and here. Like this part is actually makes sense, but this part doesn't. And how do you that trust factor that I think has to go into yeah, to being out in the world, especially as a young person today. I think you're bombarded with so many things. How do you make sense of it, and how do you yeah, how do you find your kind of own way through?
My thanks to Hubert Davis, whose dystopian thriller The Well opens in theaters across Canada this Friday, January 23rd. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find Hubert on Instagram at hubert.davis.director, and you can find Top Gun on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Netflix, Crave, and Paramount Plus in Canada, and Paramount Plus and Fubo in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 40 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.